We're glad that you're here to take a journey with Mike Jenkins as he leads us from the Bridge of Ice to the Trail of Tears. Mike is a native of Rutherford County. He's also a graduate of Chase High School, Isothermal Community College, and Fruitland Bible College. He served for 10 years as a missionary in Africa, and he also served his country for 30 years via the United States Army, so thank you for that. He said when he was in the Army, he was called Sarge, but that I can call him Mike tonight. For the past 25 years, Mike has extensively researched the Native American culture and collected fascinating artifacts. A portion of his Native American artifacts are on permanent loan to the Cherokee County History and Arts Museum in South Carolina. He has shared his knowledge on WSPA in Spartanburg and on the North Carolina Educational TV Network. And we are delighted he is here to share with us tonight. Thank you, Mike.
She forgot to say I'm cold-natured. I'm going to take my coat off for a little while anyway. I'm honored to be here with you tonight. I'm thankful for the opportunity to come and talk about one of my favorite subjects, and thankful to History Matters for inviting me to come. I have spent a lot of time. So I've done this in schools and I don't know, high schools and grammar schools and middle schools, and used to get a lot of invitations. Nowadays they say they don't have time to talk about the American Indian. They're too busy talking about other things. But such is the days that we live. There's been numerous people that helped me to put this thing together, and my stepson Ivan over there, he's handled a lot of the technical stuff, and he's helping us with the imagery tonight. Wayne Smith, he's the one that initially invited me to come and had a part in getting me on the program. Kathy Webb I've worried her to death for the last month, in and out, trying to make sure I had my ducks in a row. Clark Burleson was even here, the IT guy. He came by one day and helped us work out a couple of kinks. But I would be remiss if I would stand here tonight and not give thanks to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Because 2 years ago, not quite, almost 2 years ago, they had to rush me to the hospital for an emergency surgery, and they really didn't expect I was going to make it. I didn't know that at the time. They told me after the fact. We didn't think you was going to make it. I had, I've forgotten how many, something like 20 blood clots in my lungs. Couldn't breathe, just, and didn't realize how close I was to being gone. But I said all that just to say this: I'm living on borrowed time, and so I'm just thankful to Him for His grace and mercy to allow me to do anything. So it's Him that allowed me to be here tonight. Also, the artifacts that I brought here is kind of just a sample of what we have on display down in Gaffney at the county museum there. They have given me a place to display this stuff and provided the security for it for a number of years. And we change stuff in and out, move it. It's not the exact same thing all the time, but they keep a pretty good display, and it's always, just as you come through the front door, it's one of the first things that you'll encounter. I wanted to extend an invitation. Some of you have probably been there, over on College Drive there in Gaffney. Some of you have been. There was a lady that was there, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, and she was talking about the presentation that happened here. So I think she was from Rutherford. I don't know who that was, but at any rate, a few of you may have been there, but for those of you who have not, Gaffney's not that far away. It's, 35 miles or something like that. It's well worth the trip. It will amaze you what a place they have put together there. Wayne Smith, those of you who know him, Wayne's been, and he had his mouth open the whole time we were there. You know, it's that kind of place. Lot of history and quality stuff, you know. They've even got a new edition of the place now where there's a huge screen on the wall. You walk in and there's a small, like a computer here, and you touch the year that you want it to be, and boom, you're right in the middle of 1775 or whatever, you know. And it's really worth the trip. We've included in your program tonight a coupon that will allow you to get in for half price. The regular fee is only $5, but for those that are here tonight, you've got an invitation to come for half price. So, you know, one day when you have a half a day and you make a round through the museum, get you something to eat, make a little day trip and come by. I'll promise you, and my card is up here, my name and number is up here. Anybody that goes to the museum and doesn't like it, there's my phone number. Call me and tell me why. I'll be glad to. I'll take the heat if anybody says it's not, not a good thing. I don't think there'll be anybody that will call. It's a very well done museum, and especially it's just a surprise to see something like that. Gaffney's a little mill town. I don't know, 15,000, something like that. And to see that quality of a museum there it's really a surprise. But we didn't come to talk about Gaffney tonight, did we? I want to get started with our presentation tonight, and we will be talking about how the Native American came to North America, how he lived, how he died, and where he is right now. The ice age that had covered North America for 2 million years was melting. The sun was hitting the earth at a slightly different angle. They say that the earth tilted just a little bit differently on its axis, and that caused the sun to be able to start melting the ice. And the Stone Age, the Ice Age was ending. The Stone Age was beginning, and the dawn of the Native American was breaking on the horizon. The history of the Native American gets little or no attention in our schools today. And I'm talking about any level of school. Yet without the Native American, there wouldn't be an America. Those first explorers from Europe that came here, they had about as much chance of survival as a feather in a whirlwind. And the only reason they made it is because some Native American took pity on them and helped them to survive. So we owe them a debt of gratitude. We've paid them everything but that, but at any rate, we owe them a debt of gratitude for where we are and what we have. Go ahead. The time of the Native American here was 12,000 years, and that 12,000 years is divided into 3 sections. The first section is called the Paleo. That's the first 2,000 years. Then the center part is the 8,000 years of the Archaic period. And then the final 2,000 is what we call the woodland or the tribal period. During Paleo time, they were exploring and learning about where things were and where you could go, what was safe, what worked, what didn't work, what animals that you could get close and which ones would attack you, and just a lot of things. They were exploring all over the continent. By 2,000 years later, in the archaic time, they had become a little more comfortable, and things started to settle down just a little bit, and the population started to grow. So that was a time of expansion. And then in the final 2,000 years, so if you start today and go back 2,000 years, in those times, that was the time of their expiration. And we'll talk about what caused them to expire. Okay? Want to look first. You hear that sound? That's the sound of running water. Think about all the ice. Several feet of ice that had covered the ground for all these years. Now it's melting. What's going to happen? Water, right? And running from high ground down the hills. First just little trickles, and then as time progressed, more like what you just heard. And so all this water is coming down the hills and off the mountains, and it's ponding up in the valleys. So that the earliest man, when he got here, the only thing he could see was the tops of the hills, because everything else was either under ice or underwater. And so today, when we find those earliest types of points, that's where you find them, near the top of the hill. Anytime you find Native American stuff, it's going to be close to a source of water. It's going to be close to a creek or a river or a branch or a spring, something. There'll be water usually within 50 feet. And so, close to a source of water. But anyway, at this time, it's called the prehistoric time for good reason. That just simply means there's not any records. And there's not any pictures, not any videos. All there is just the artifacts that they left, their artifacts, and our guesses as to what they did with them. One of the most used theories involves the crossing from Asia across the Bering Strait. Now, the Bering Strait, if you can visualize Alaska up there in your mind, you know there's a little tail of islands that spring out like that. That's the Aleutian Island. That last one out there is within 90 miles of the coast of Asia. This point in time in history, that was ice. And so you could just walk across. And nobody knows. It's just theories and guesses. But my own personal thought is these were nomadic hunters. Their everyday business was to track animals, find them, kill one, and get the food. So why not that they're tracking a group of animals, and the animals know where the bridge is, and they cross the bridge, the hunters are in behind them, and they follow them out to a place, and one or two of those animals is killed. They're all happy about it. They take that food back to where they came from and tell the people the group that they came from, hey, we were successful over here. Y'all send some of your hunters. And so they started to go. And then, of course, you know, when you get there, somebody wants to go a little bit further and a little bit further. And so, first thing you know, they're all the way down through Canada and into North America. And that was the Clovis era. Go to the next one there, Ivan. What's this? What does that have to do with Native Americans? Nothing. Not a thing. What it's there for is to try to help you understand how long ago 12,000 years is. The pyramids is, that's an ancient thing. And people get all excited, oh, we found this or that in the pyramids, And they're really, you know, it's an icon of old stuff, right? The pyramids were built 5,000 years ago. Where we're talking about was 7,000 years before the first brick was laid on the pyramid. So it was a long, long time ago. Archaeologists say that the early exploration began some 12,000 years ago. It continued for 2,000 years as their numbers slowly increased. Much of the continent remained under ice and water, but the world was changing. Early man could see the tops of hills and mountains, as we've discussed before. Perhaps that is why the eastern band of the Cherokee is in the mountains. Because when their ancient ancestors got here, that's the only thing they could see. Native Americans were very, very, very traditional. That's what got them killed in one sense of the word, because they kept doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. This is the ways of our father. This was the ways of my grandfather. And so, those earliest explorers that came into that area, the top, the high ground in the mountains is probably what they encountered. They made a camp there, and they're still there today. Makes sense to me. But then again, that's just my theory. Many times natives remain, and it's not just them, many times natives remain in one spot. Oftentimes, when you find a good spot where there's several different, or several pieces, you'll find that there's pieces that are maybe 1,000 years old, and on the same piece of ground, no bigger than this auditorium, there'll be a piece over there somewhere that's 9,000 or 10,000 years old in the same place. So what happened? The first guy came and he was successful. He went back and he told his son, and he came back some years later and he went and told his grandson, and it just kept going for hundreds and even thousands of years. So now that we kind of understand how long ago we're talking about, go to the next. Got to realize that it wasn't just man that was here. It was also herds of big animals that were roaming around, such as the woolly mammoth, looking for pastures and looking for places to graze. The mammoth is believed to have numbered in the millions at one time. They covered all of North America. And so an adult mammoth stood some 11 to 12 feet high at the front shoulder, big tusks, like an elephant. But they, as I said, were all across the continent. Early man learned how to hunt them, and there was a way, there's a way you could do it and get killed right quick, but there's also a way that you could bring them down. And so they learned how to perfect the skill of hunting the mammoth, and they hunted it to extinction. Oh, they were a good source of food. What was that very first group that came across the ice bridge? What were they looking for? Food, clothing, and shelter. When you went to work this morning, what were you looking for? Food, clothing, and shelter, right? So it's the same thing. But they didn't have a Walmart. They didn't have A&P. They had nature. And so they found everything. When they could bring down a mammoth, there was your food, there was your clothes, and you could even take the big bones and turn it into some kind of structure and stretch and hide over it and have a shelter. So everything that they were looking for was in that one animal, and I guess that's why they took all of them down. At the same time, you can see there were also huge predators. That's the North American lion up there. Do you know there were lions in North America? I've been to Africa several times, and I've seen them up close. I've seen them when their heads are so bloody they just made a kill. And you wouldn't want to be close to one when he was hungry, I'll put it that way. They walked on the earth huge predators of all kinds, and they had huge fangs and claws that made them able-bodied killers. Every time a man killed an animal, let's say early guy, he's over here, and him and his buddies, and they brought down a mammoth. Well, in order to bring him down, he's been hit with a bunch of spears, and he's bleeding. That scent of blood goes out in the air, and every predator in the area knows about it within just a few minutes. And guess what? They're hungry too. And they figure they can take it away from him. And sometimes I'm sure they did. But at any rate, they would come and they would take the food, and sometimes they would take the man's life. It was a very difficult time in history. The estimation of that earliest man is that he lived, if he was really good and smart and successful, he lived about 25 years. You go to the next one. So how did Paleo Man defend himself against, how did he hunt, how did he defend himself? Well, he had to take a piece, he didn't have anything, he didn't have a .357, he didn't have a 308, or, he didn't have any kind of a gun. All he had was his feet. He didn't even have a horse to ride at this point in time. All he had was his feet and whatever nature provided. Nature provides air and trees and rocks and water, and so out of that, somewhere or another, you got to figure a way to live. So from that, the first spear came to be. And so, and of course, you can obviously see this is a mop handle mock-up, but yet still the idea that they could take a piece of a tree and turn it into a weapon simply by putting a sharp rock on the end of it. They had to take that stone and shape it a certain way, split the end of this shaft, and then put the stone in there in place and bind it on, and bang, got yourself a weapon. Remember I said how big a woolly mammoth was? 11 feet, 12 feet at the shoulder. How'd you like to get up close and personal? You got to get pretty close, don't you? And that mammoth, he ain't wanting to hear all that. So they had to figure out some way. But they were successful. They used fire. They sneaked up in the dark. They would distract them in different ways, attack from different directions, all kind of stuff. They made it work. But this is the first defense. You didn't have to have a concealed carry weapon for one of these. Just carry it right out and open. But the Clovis point is that earliest point that they made. And this point right here, if you see on this picture, you see how the material's been removed up through the center of it, and it forms like a gully looking. They call that a flute. And those earliest points were made in a fluted style. There's some laying on the table up here if you want to see them closer after we're done. As a matter of fact, it's the same ones that you see in that picture. But those were made, and they were made in different sizes. I mean, you didn't need a point this big to kill a small animal, So they made them in different sizes, just like we make bullets. There's 22s, and then there's whatever, 50 caliber. A lot of different sizes. But at any rate, the first one that's on record was found in Clovis, New Mexico in 1929 by a guy who was not looking for anything to do with American Indians. He was a paleontologist looking at the bones of a woolly mammoth that was in the sand, and he was trying to dig it up. And in the process, when he cleaned the area off, there in the rib cage was a point. Oh my goodness, what was that? And so from that, and from radiocarbon dating the ashes and so forth, they realized that this was the first type of point, and it was the earliest point that was ever made. And then after that, mammoth remains were found all over the country. There were mammoths here, right here. Maybe some on this campus, I don't know. But in this general area, the mammoth was here and present. And a lot of times over the years since then, they found Clovis points in connection with the remains of mammoths. Here's your interesting sideline while we're right here and before we go any further. The Clovis point was the first means of self-defense, and it was the first means of providing food. It was important. It wasn't just a collection of arrowheads. If you didn't have a point that you could use on the end of a stick that you could control and throw, you didn't eat. And you're going to make 25 years. So it was very, very, very important. It's the Clovis point is the first thing ever manufactured in North America. And at that time, it was the single most important thing in North America. They are made from a material that we call C-H-E-R-T, chert. Just a simple word that just means it's a type of stone that's high in silicon. Silicon being the quality sort of like glass, means it chips easily and makes a really sharp edge. Okay? High in silicon. Let's get the time machine for just a minute. We come all the way back to where we are now. What's the date? That was the Ice Age, Stone Age era. This is the Information Age. And the most important thing in a telephone, or a car, or a house, or a TV, and all that, a little chip. What's it made out of? Silicon. So, in 12,000 years, things really had changed a lot, hasn't it? It is amazing when you really stop and think about it, just how little things have changed. A man told me one time in relation to hunting artifacts, he said men live now where they have always lived. And a lot of times you find that's true. Yeah, because don't we like to build our houses on high ground so it'll drain off around it? They didn't want to be down in the swamp and, in moccasins, in the mud and all. So they built and lived in the same places that we like. The Clovis point was made from something called the preform. They didn't just make it, they didn't finalize it, I'll put it that way. They would make it to a certain stage and then they'd take it with them to the hunt site. When they knew they were about to get ready to actually use it, then they would finalize it so that when they did use it, it had that sharpest edge on it. Because right as soon as right this time you break it, that's the time it's really sharp. Here's an example of one right here. And this is what you call the preform. It's ready to go to the hunt site when they're ready to actually go and try to take down their prey. Then they'll do a little bit of extra chipping on it to get it down to the sharps. If you look at it, look on the picture up there, I'm going to turn this one to the side. You see it's round at the bottom and pointed at the top? And you see a teardrop? Every preform that they made for 12,000 years was made in this shape. And they made them small ones and big ones, all different kinds of material for thousands. So they made gazillions of these. But every one was made in the shape of a teardrop. And I think that was a little bit prophetic of what was to come. One, as I said, one's here on the table for you to see, and I'll be glad for you to come and examine it closer after we get through. Okay, Ivan, go ahead. Go one more. We just talked about that. Okay. The next thing that we want to talk about is a subject of lithics and carbon dating. Lithics is the word that simply means the type of rock. If you look at all these artifacts up here, you'll see a lot of different colors. Some of them are spotted, some of them are kind of striped looking, and just different rocks, different types of rocks that things were made from. So that's what lithics means. What's the type of rock that it came from? And different materials come from different parts of the country. And people that are in this business can look at a particular piece, and just like this piece right here on the table, it's got pink and a little blue and some beige and stuff in it, and they say, oh yeah, that's from Ohio. Or they might look at this crystal board here and say, oh yeah, that's from North Carolina, I know that well, you know. So the look of the material is kind of a really key indicator as to where it came from. The other issue is carbon dating. And carbon dating, you can't carbon date an arrowhead because the arrowhead never was alive. And so you have to carbon date something that was alive. Guess what? Every hunting camp that ever existed had a fire pit. And every fire pit had ashes. And all the ashes came from a tree which was one time alive. So they can carbon date the ashes, and they're able to, they say, get within 500 to 1,000 years. So now you find a piece and you look at what it looks like, and you know about where it came from, where it was made, and then from carbon dating and the shape of the artifact, you know what it was and about when it was made. And so that's the way that we do that stuff when we're looking. Let's go on now to that next time in history, and wow, ooh, hadn't heard that in a long time. I don't know about y'all. When you have food, clothes, and shelter in abundance, what's the next thing that happens? Huh? That's a good time to start a family, ain't it? And so that's what they did. And so during this time, this first 2,000 years have passed, and so now they're into a time of prosperity, I guess you could say. And during this time, food was more plentiful because they had learned how to hunt better. And they had moved on from this handheld spear, and they got smart. They decided they didn't want to get up close and personal with that mammoth, but this thing was too heavy to throw any distance. What you going to do? Let's make one that's a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller. And instead of worrying about killing them with one big fatal blow, let's get about 10 or 12 guys together, and we'll sneak up and we'll all attack him at the same time. What is that saying? Death by 1,000 cuts. And so this was an innovation that they came up with to lighten up the spear. It was available, and it was able to be thrown greater distance, and it was quite effective. Then they decided, well, let's make it even just a little bit better. Somebody came up, you know, with an idea one day. He said, let's take, all this is tree branches, right? You can tell it is. This was recently made by a good friend of mine. But at any rate, you take another tree branch and you shape it a certain way. You put a notch in the back of the spear and you line it up, and you can hold that a certain way, and you can throw it with this spear thrower. They call it the addle. And all it really means is that it was, your arm is only so long, but if you put this on the end of it, now you've got more leverage. And this thing can travel a lot faster, a lot further, and be a lot more deadly when it got there. And so with that, they were able to provide more and more food. More and more food meant more and more babies. They estimate that the population at one time, about the time of the pyramid, about that 5,000 year mark, they estimate that the population of Native Americans in North America was 60 million. 60 million. The United States is 340 million, I think, something like that right now. So 60 million is a pretty big number. Life of the Native American at this point was as good as it would ever get. And this is a little showing how they use the atlatl. It takes some practice, but there's still people hunting with this today. Especially some of the folks up in the Eskimo areas and that, they still hunt with the atlatl today. And once you practice with it, you can get really good with it. I mean, you can hit targets 100 yards away, so that you don't have to get close and personal and risk getting stepped on. And as I said, it's still in use today in several places. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is another innovation that they made when they decided that they didn't want to make that fluted point anymore. They wanted something that was easier and quicker to make, and so they came up with the idea to make a notch point. Notch point was easier to make and took less time, so they came up with that idea, and so they could put notches on there a lot easier. And the flute, when you try to put one in, you work on it all for hours at a time, and you get that flute almost in, and it breaks in half. With the notch points, that was a lot less likely, and so they went to the notches, and they were able to bind those onto the shaft that they were going to use, and it was worked out well for a number of years. These style of point, there's three of them, and they're labeled right down here as notched points. That style went on for a number of years in the early part of the archaic time. Let's say from about 9,000 up to around 6,000, 5,500, somewhere in there. They made a lot of notched points. Let's go to the next one. Around here, one thing that you're going to see is this style. And if you own a piece of land in Rutherford County, Cherokee County, York County, Spartanburg County, I don't care, anywhere around here, you're very likely to find one this shape made out of white quartz in your yard. I mean, there are just bunches of them out there. And so it's quite likely that you might see one of those. And because they're so plentiful, they're not worth much. Anything that's got too much of variety, too much availability, if it's not rare, it's not valuable. And so there's so many of them that they just, they're not worth hardly anything. You can find one and it's going to be 4,000 years old and in perfect condition. But because there's so many of them, they're just not that valuable. But yet still, they were very effective, or they wouldn't have made them that long. What they did with these, they used bamboo. And they'd take a bamboo shaft, and the bamboo's hollow on the end. They got point down in the end of that, take a little bit of tar that they can find out in nature, and stick it in there, lay it in the sun, let it dry, bang, you got yourself a little spear that is quite effective. Let's go to the next one. My phone has decided to come alive over here for some reason. I don't even know what it's doing. What it's alarming or something, I don't even know. But at any rate, I'm going to try not to pay any attention. It's not a call. I don't know what it's doing. This is the time of the formation of the tribes. And this is the time that we're more familiar with, because this is the time that was on TV. This is Roy and Dale. This is the Lone Ranger. This is whoever, you know. All those cowboys and Indian things that John Wayne that we used to watch, you know, all of that stuff. That's what a lot of people, when you say Indian or Native American, that's what you think of. And so this is that time. The last 2,000 years of the 12,000 years of their history. So what happened? What happened was that they had gotten, their numbers had gotten big, and they had gotten so good at hunting that there had to be competition, because there was only so much food to be found out there, and there's so many people looking for it. Remember the Cabbage Patch doll? What happened? People, no, it's mine, you know. And so there was competition. And so in order to hang on to their place where they could hunt and have food, they banded together. And so along this river, they bind together and call themselves a tribe. And a lot of times the tribe had something to do with a particular river. And so the Lumbees up in North Carolina, on the Lumberton River, and the PDs down south of here in South Carolina. And, you know, I don't think there was ever any Broad River Indians, but at any rate, they would bind themselves together. And they were doing that to try to hang on to what they had. They wanted that prosperity. They wanted to keep on eating. And they didn't want somebody else to come and take it away from them. So there was competition between tribes. And then, that wasn't bad enough, the folks started coming from Europe. Just a handful, don't worry about them, it ain't nothing. Next week there's another ship. Next week there's another ship. And first thing you know, there's a whole bunch of them, and they wanting land, and they wanting animals, and what are we going to do with them? And they're going to run us off, and it became a real struggle for the Native Americans. By the time of the Revolution, it was, you either going to take sides with us, or you going to take sides with England. Which one you going to do? Well, they'd been always trading with England. England had been good to them. And, you know, they'd bring their stuff that they could catch, raise whatever, and they'd trade. And so they didn't want to hurt that relationship. So they sided with England a lot of times. Some of them didn't take a side. But in the end, they had the scalp for both sides. And when the war was over, anybody that was known to have participated on the English side was severely punished. So they were caught in the middle. No matter which way it went, they couldn't win. But the tribes formed, and when 1500, the Spanish, it was either a Spanish queen or a Portuguese queen, one or the other, came, sent a group here, and said, okay, we want you to go to North America, whatever they call it, go to the New World, and come back and tell us what you saw. And so they did. They didn't have any cameras, so they brought artists with them, and they made pictures. And so they got into the Carolinas, and here's the Indian, and he's the chief, and he wants his picture done. So they drew his picture and took it back. And they said, this is what a Native American looks like in the Carolinas in 1546. Guess what? He wasn't Cherokee. He was Creek. And that shocked me when I found that out. I thought the Cherokees dominated here forever, but it turns out they didn't. The Creeks eventually moved on further out west, and then the Cherokees kind of took over. But at any rate, I will go to the next one. This guy has something called a bow and arrow. And we believe that the Vikings came in the 1500s, and they brought the bow and arrow and showed it to the Indians. They learned how to use it, and from then on it was a much easier life for them to hunt and to defend themselves. And so eventually every tribe would use the bow and arrow. And as they did, then the competition that they had going on, that would lead to Indian wars. Sometimes the Indian wars were between the Apaches and the Sioux or whoever, but a lot of times it was between the white people and the Indians. And so there was a lot of fighting, but it turns out, of course, that the bow and arrow was just simply no match for bullets and guns. And you know how it ended. Not well for the Native Americans. But they were able, for 1,000 years or so, the use of the bow helped them to hunt even better than the use of the atlatl. And I think some of them used both, just kind of depending on what game they might be after. Let's go to the next one. During this time, they changed the style of the point again, and instead of making the notch point, they went to the stem point. Okay, the fluted point took a lot of work, and it was a lot of workmanship. The notch point took a little bit less workmanship. Now they're going to make a stem point, and that's a little bit less workmanship. Sound familiar? And by the end of the time of the American Indian, they weren't making anything but just a little tiny triangle. That's all it was. Almost no workmanship. They could make them, they could make hundreds or thousands of them at a time, and they were really, really simple to make, quick and easy, disposable, didn't have to worry about keeping up with it. Is anybody hearing anything I'm saying? Does that sound anything like what we know anything about? Yep. Remember when people used to take pride in stuff they made? American Indians used to too. But it changed. And over time, they opted for something that could be made quick and easy instead of something that was made with quality. But stem points, they're also up here for you to examine. Go to the next one, Ivan. This is a chief, one of the Cherokee chiefs in the day. Notice that his style of dress, he's not half naked, is he? He's wearing the same kind of coat that the frontiersman wore. The only difference, he's got a feather up there in his bandana, whatever. Cherokees, never mind what the rest of the tribe did, some did and some didn't, but the Cherokees in particular tried every way they could to assimilate with the white folks. They went to our schools, they adopted our ways, they tried to talk in our language, they adopted our style of clothing, everything that they could, trying to blend in. And so this was in the 1700s, early 1700s, in the colonial time. This was a Cherokee chief. They did all they could do to blend in, and yet in the end, their rights were thrown away. Here's a native village where the people were living in teepees. Now, Cherokees, some places maybe, but most of the time they had a different style of house. But this is what you think about when you think about Native Americans living out on the plains and that. This is the style of place that they would have lived in. There's a shade there, but that's also a drying rack. you take meat, you know, you kill something and you take it and lay it on that rack and dry it out and make jerky out of it so it'll last longer. You got your canoes made out of birch bark. You got a horse. You got a few women and a few old men. The young guys they're out and gone. They're hunting for food. And that's typically the way it was. That most of the time when you come to one of these villages, the young men would pretty much always be gone. Let's go to the next one. As I said, it was a time of war between tribes. And not every struggle went to war, okay? Let's be honest about that. Not every one. They talked some things out. You know, okay, all right, we'll let you hunt over on this part, and we'll hunt over on this part, and we'll be okay. Abraham and Lot, remember them? But they worked out some of the differences, and then sometimes they just couldn't resolve it. Most of the time, to be honest about it, it was the young ones. I'm not giving them nothing. I'll take all what I want, and you know. And so they ended up in a time of war. Well, when they finally came to some kind of an agreement, this is what they used. They used these to symbolize that they had come to an agreement. If our leaders make an agreement today, they bring out a piece of paper, something fancy, and everybody gets their own pen and they sign it. You know, here, President, and here, you know, whoever you are, and you sign that agreement. They didn't do that. They put something, tobacco or whatever, in their pipe and light it up. And each man that was involved in the agreement would take a draw off of that pipe. And they would ceremoniously hand it from one to the other. So what do? Our piece of paper says that we agree that we're going to do so-and-so. Their smoking of the pipe said that when that smoke came inside of this man, and that same smoke came inside of this man, and when it went out, it went to the Great Spirit. So there was an agreement between the Spirit and these two men that they would work together to keep the peace. And that's what the older generation always struggled for, always strove for. But the young generation, nope, I ain't giving them nothing. I'll cut their head off. And so it was a constant battle between peace and war. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, there were posters up everywhere recruiting, and the U.S. Army was recruiting Indian fighters. There were numbers of immigrants coming to this country, and they needed a job. They didn't even know how to ride a horse, but they could be an Indian fighter, and that's what a lot of them were, right off the boat. And they'd take them out there, and, you know, here's your gun, and good luck. And but whites were struggling. It was agriculture. Our society was an agriculture society at that time. White European people needed a piece of ground in order to farm. You needed a piece of ground if you was going to raise cows. You needed a piece of ground if you was going to raise corn. Whatever you was going to do, it all depended on having a piece of ground. Well, where was you going to get it? There wasn't any real estate companies. So, had to deal with the Indians. And the struggles that kept popping up. And, you know, there's been many a struggle that just didn't go well. Ivan, let's go that next one. Buffalo, the woolly mammoth's gone. He's gone. But the buffalo, at one point in time, they say when Christopher Columbus landed in 1492, that there were 60 million buffalo. In 1900, there were 115. Just that something. This picture was made in the 1890s in, I think it's Pennsylvania. And these are buffalo skulls that these men are standing beside of, that big mountain of skulls there. There was a group of men who would go out west, and they called themselves skinners. And they'd go out there and they'd shoot buffalo and take their knife and cut the hide off of them, and they'd throw the hide over here and leave meat and food on the ground of rock and above us. There was headlines in the paper. Kill a buffalo. For every buffalo you kill, you're killing an Indian. Now remember, go back 150 years, it was those same, the ancestors of those same people that were saying, help us! Help us, we don't know what to do. Show us how to have some food, we're starving. Help us not to be so cold. And now, time's passed. Kill a buffalo so you could take it because they need, the Indians depended on it. And so the struggle had become epic and real. And all of these, how many skulls are there? How many do you guess? I mean, look at that man standing beside us, and another one up on top. Every one of those was a living, breathing buffalo that was killed for nothing except his skin. Because at the time in northeastern North America and in Europe, buffalo coats were kind of in vogue. And so, thousands upon thousands. Russians loved to come and get on the train. You know, they built a train line that went across the center of the country, and Russians loved to come and get on the train with their gun and stick their gun out the window and ride down and see how many buffaloes they could kill. Just shoot them and watch them fall. They didn't want them. They didn't even go get the hide. They just wanted to watch them fall. And so, things got progressively worse. I have missed the point that I'd like to back up just a little bit. We were talking a minute ago about a stemmed point. A stem point that you find around here is going to be made out of white quartz most likely. And there's one. It's about that size, and that's what you're going to find in your garden, in your flower bed, out in your field, whatever. If you find one, it's going to look something like that right there. Okay? This would have been used, maybe, it could be a small knife, or it could have been used as a projectile to hunt deer. That's about what that was for. Okay? But I just wanted you to know that all of them weren't this size. Check this out. This came from up in the mountain, and nobody's quite sure exactly what they were doing with it. Some people say it was so big it must have been ceremonial. But at any rate, there's a lot of difference. The shape is the same. And as a matter of fact, this shape is the one shape that they use more across North America than any other shape. When you go to a national park today and you say, welcome to Kings Mountain, there's a little arrowhead on there. Ding! It's going to be that shape right there. So, the Savannah River is a very, very much used point, but they varied in size greatly, from very small to somewhere near huge. Okay, so let's get back. We're all the way down. We're coming into the home stretch of our story. Go to the next one, Ivan. Gold was discovered in Dahlonega, Georgia. You know where Dahlonega is? It ain't that far from here. you can get those drive done, it wouldn't take too long. Gold was discovered in Dahlonega, Georgia in 1828. As soon as the word got back to the state capital, the governor pronounced that all laws and treaties with the Indians were null and void. He just hadn't done nothing. Null and void. They had no right to own land. They were savages. It had to be dealt with. What did that mean? That meant that the white folks could go in there and mine the gold. And the Indians couldn't stop. 1828. 1830, 2 years later, the Congress of the United States of America passed the Indian Removal Act that said Indians would be forcibly removed from their land wherever they were in the southeast, Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas, Virginia. They would be forcibly removed from their homes and taken to a place in the center of the country called Indian Territory, where they would be given a piece of land. It's basically a place where nobody else wanted. And they took them take them out. And the Indians said, what? Wait a minute. I've been to your schools. I wear your clothes. I eat your food. I speak your language. Some of us have been elected to political office. You can't do that. And so they appealed it to the courts. And the courts said, nope. Next court. Nope. Next court. Nope. Finally got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said the Indian Removal Act is unconstitutional. It cannot be carried out. You got a $20 bill in your pocket? Anybody? $20 bill's got a picture of Andy Jackson. Andy Jackson was the president when that decision came down from the Supreme Court, and I won't use the same word that he used, but basically he said, blank the Supreme Court, send the army and get them savages out of here. And so never mind what happened to the Seminoles, never mind what happened to all the other tribes in the southeast, let's just talk about the Cherokees. Some 18,000 Cherokees were forcibly taken out of their home and forced to walk the Trail of Tears all the way to present-day Oklahoma. And on the way, some 8,000 died of starvation, exposure, disease, and graves that were marked only with a stone, just a random stone, littered the trail all the way to there. A few escaped back into the hills, and so today you have the western band of the Cherokee and the eastern band of the Cherokee, and both of them have a casino. Ha! Yeah! Come to the casino. That's the answer for the Indian. When the casinos came in, they didn't just bring gambling. They brought some other stuff. Drugs, alcohol, prostitution. So that today in Cherokee, there is a call of domestic violence about every 30 minutes. They've had to add and add and add to their police force up there since the casino came in. Most Native Americans still living today live on some small reservations. In the state of Oklahoma, the remnants of some 40 tribes is still there. And most of them are alcoholics, drug addicts, severely depressed, suicidal. So, the Native American, once proud people that survived on this continent. Go find me a landfill that was created by a Native American. Go find me a stream or a river that was polluted by a Native American. But those people, that proud society, that proud culture, was, with the Trail of Tears, destroyed. If you want to read a little bit more and get a factual account, Bill O'Reilly wrote a book a few years ago called Killing Crazy Horse. Get you a copy of that and read it. It'll make you proud to be an American. No, it won't. Thank you for allowing me to be here. A once proud people was destroyed. There are exceptions to all rules, and I have met a few that were successful businessmen. Met 2 or 3 in Oklahoma that are doing okay. But for every 1 or 2 that's doing okay, there's many, many more that are not doing well at all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to sit down. We'll have maybe questions a little bit later. Kathy's got something she wants to say.